It is Men's Health Week here in Australia, and I absolutely cannot wait to see all the advocacy and activism that's going to be done by men who spent the rest of the year hijacking women's conversations about women's issues by asking, what about the men? Hello, I'm Summer Tothill, and I regularly run Q&As with my supporters on Instagram on matters relating to gender equality. So what you're about to watch is 1 week's worth of these, and if you would like to get involved with them yourself, just come and follow me on Instagram at Summer Tothill. While you're here, please stick around and subscribe to my channel and check out the rest of the Ask a Feminist playlist. What do you say when a man tells you that it's no use rejecting your husband's surname because your surname is already a man's, i.e. your father? Yeah, this is an argument that you see all the time when women dare to declare that we would rather keep our own identities if we're going to get married and not violently destroy our identities by subsuming it with that of a man's who has frankly done nothing to deserve it. And this argument is so predictable that you can see it coming every single time the topic comes up, and that's why I and other feminists have come up with a lot of pre-prepared answers for this. I always say your name is your own as a woman, even if it is your father's. And that's making some assumptions because not everybody's surname is their father's name. Your name is yours, and you have every right to want to preserve the identity that you were born into, and to which all of your accomplishments might be attributed as well. But even if you have no accomplishments, you have the right to want to preserve your identity. And frankly, we are never going to eliminate the patrilineal surname tradition unless we interrupt it somewhere. And so somewhere, your father's name has to become your name, and then in a couple of generations, it will have been a woman's name. So that's what I always say to that argument. There are also a lot of other super predictable arguments against women keeping their surnames on marriage, and like to the point where over the years I've written several like blog posts, articles, and I've made quite a few videos and pieces of content like galleries about the patrilineal surname tradition because the arguments are so predictable. You see the same things said all the time, and people think they're being really original and insightful when they try to argue against it. But frankly, as I have said publicly many times, the insistence on the patrilineal surname tradition is nothing but a form of identity illusion. It is misogynistic and oppressive. It is not empowering in any way to women, and it is frankly violently disrespectful of men to expect women to do that to themselves just for marriage and like purely based on gender. What's your take on Men's Health Week? Yeah, it is Men's Health Week here in Australia, and I absolutely cannot wait to see all the advocacy and activism that's going to be done by men who spent the rest of the year hijacking women's conversations about women's issues by asking, what about the men? I am so excited to see them put that same energy into actually addressing issues that pertain to men, particularly those which are created and maintained by the same patriarchy that oppresses women. I know I'm just going to see every single man who is so concerned about men's mental health, about suicide rates among men, about workplace health and safety for men, just coming out in droves and supporting men to be forming better community relationships with one another, to be getting therapy, to be addressing their health issues, and to be fostering healthy communication and relationships with the women in their lives. I also cannot wait for the men to be talking about how patriarchal expectations of gender roles are harming women and harming men, and about how the structures and systems that men have set up to protect themselves are also tearing them down and using women as collateral in the process. I just know that every man who has told me it takes two to tango, you hate men, but what about the men? Men experience violence more. Women can also be violent, are going to be setting up advocacy groups, putting their money where their mouth is, donating to causes, and making sure that the experience of boyhood and manhood in this culture is not a fundamentally emotionally disenfranchising experience that reduces boys and men's humanity. I just know that that's what they're going to do. Yeah. What should the government actually do about DV and all the women being killed? Yeah, this feels kind of unsolvable sometimes, doesn't it? Particularly because it tends to take a crisis for the government to actually say anything and have any sense of care about this increasing issue in Australia. Femicide is on the rise, and all the government is doing is promising more funding to domestic violence shelters and services. Meanwhile, it hasn't actually released or given that funding that it promised. And frankly, while that sometimes sounds like the solution, all it's doing is giving money to the end point of the problem and providing no actual solutions to stopping men from being violent towards women to begin with. And that is where the only real difference can be made. At the point where a woman is fleeing for her life or with her children, it's already the most dangerous time and the damage has already been done. There are so many fronts that men's violence against women has to be attacked upon. And the ones that I always tend to come back to is like women's economic disenfranchisement, because if women are empowered to be independent, to be able to have the resources to leave relationships that have become abusive or unsafe, then the harm is significantly minimized. A lot of women are forced to stay in relationships where they are perfectly aware they're not safe because economically they simply can't. And if we didn't have the gender pay gap and the motherhood penalty and workplace discrimination against women and gender bias against women in the workplace, women wouldn't be as shut out from access to capital and power and financial independence as they are. That, of course, is only one slice of the pie. We also obviously have to address men's socialization as males and what it means to be a man and what masculinity is. But I think probably the more pressing aspect of that I would like to see addressed is the radicalization of young boys through algorithmic misogyny presented to them on social media platforms. The manosphere is toxic and it is almost impossible to avoid it. Young boys and young males are being indoctrinated from a really young age into a misogyny that they don't even have to go looking for. It finds them. So I would really like to see the government making some huge crackdowns on the social media platforms, being able to moderate this content. I think that the government likes to make a lot of noise about certain things going on in social media, and none of them are, to me, as important as this one particular issue. That's it for this Q&A. Thank you so much for listening. Find me on Instagram at summertothill. That's summer with an O, spelt the same way as you see in this YouTube channel. I can't wait to see you there.